Um, First and foremost, I write because the human condition mystifies me. Um, I am always perplexed by the complexity of what it is humanity is, and I still struggle to try and get some sort of handle on it. And of course, in my attempts, I do so via the imagination. Behind the Face of Winter um, is perhaps of all my novels the least reliant on imagination, which is not to say that there isn't a great deal of imagination in it. For example, the school in which the drama, the principal drama of the novel occurs, is completely made up, although the events themselves happened in another school. Um, So it is in I like to call it my documentary novel because it really deals with many of the situations that I as a teacher had to deal with in the defense of Black children. So that would be the short answer for writing Behind the Face of Winter. But I also, in doing so, I wanted to show where some of these students came from, what were the issues driving their parents to emigrate, and so on, so that there would be a fuller uh, uh, context for understanding the novel. Um, I think I found out that I was a writer somewhere around 1975, 1976. I had done a bit of writing in St. Vincent. I'd written two or three plays that dealt with social issues when I was 19, 20, but I never felt those plays were, um, in any way, I never felt those plays made me a writer. And I came to Canada, became immersed in my studies, and didn't really have much time to consider writing until writing claimed me. And I began writing quite seriously around 1975, poetry primarily. And eventually in the 1980s, mid 80s, I actually turned to fiction when stories began investing my head at nights, and I would have to go to teach the very next day, but the plots and the ideas were there and they wouldn't leave me alone. And so rather than spend sleepless nights with these ideas going through my head, I would just write them down, and eventually they became um, the stories, short stories, and in fact, the first novel that I wrote. I have several preferred writers, each for a different reason. Toni Morrison, uh, Earl Lovelace, Henry David Thoreau, Leslie Marmon Silko, Chinua Achebe, and I often like to think that people should ask me who are my 100 favorite writers, because I just come upon so many different writers who could easily become my favorite writers. In terms of writing genres, I now favor fiction. Poetry most definitely is the most artistic of the genres, simply because poetry is condensed language. Poetry puts certain very, very, very rigid limits on you. You must distill the thing down to its core, say a great deal in very, very little space. Fiction, and hence poetry is more hermetic, which is to say that very often people reading it don't really get the full impact. On the other hand, prose fiction leaves a lot of room for all sorts of explorations in in a more accessible style. And the beauty about prose fiction is that prose fiction itself can contain all the other genres, poetry, plays, what have you. And indeed, in almost all of my novels, there is some poetry, and sometimes even um, sort of mini plays, for that matter. Yeah, I am working on. I have two half-finished novels. Um, One of them is actually set in Dixon. Unfortunately, Dixon is probably going to be called by another name, and St. Vincent is going to become Isabella Island because I suspect that I won't be able to get back there before this pandemic is over. And that novel is almost finished. I'm really just revising it, fine tuning it, and I hope to send it off to the publisher within, I guess, I would say the next 6 months. So, just to protect myself, I so that somebody would say, that thing isn't there, or that isn't there, this is that, whatever. uh, I w- I would just put it on Isabella Island and save myself the trouble. And so Kingstown will become Hanover Town, and Georgetown would become Camden, and so on and so forth. The other novel is set largely in its part. The settings are Riley, Evesham, Cane Garden. Um, there's a cameo setting in Montreal. That one is less finished, and it deals with disguised homosexuality, the whole business which we see across the Caribbean of men who are gay, uh, masking their homosexuality by uh, marrying and donning the heterosexual mask. And I'm sort of going to explore that, or I will be exploring that in that other novel. The best book I've read in the past 12 months is a novel by a Trinidadian uh, living in Ontario. I think he lives in Toronto. Ian Williams. It's called Reproduction. And it's incredibly innovative in its narrative techniques, and really, really, really well executed. And I've actually praised it as well in the Montreal Gazette here. Right now, I am reading old material. I alternate between new authors and older authors. I've just, in fact, finished reading several books by writers here: Kanisha Lubrin, Kai Keller, Tanya Evanson, Cora Sire, Rodney St. Eloi, Leslie Roach. Now I am reading older authors: Gwendolyn Brooks and Thomas Mann. Gwendolyn Brooks selected poems, and believe it or not, Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, which was actually published um, in the first quarter, actually, first third of the 20th century.